I'm Marlene Whitaker, 63 years old, and I never thought the last time I'd see my daughter would be under a motion sensor floodlight with my suitcase torn open on her driveway. It was raining just enough to soak through the sleeves of my sweater, mascara leaking into the lines around my eyes. But I didn't move, not even when she raised her voice and told me I was nothing to her anymore. She didn't even blink when my toothbrush rolled into the gutter, or when the blouse I used to wear while watching her boys landed in the mud. She just stood there, arms crossed, next to that man half her age, like she'd already forgotten who raised her and what I gave up for her to stand where she was. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been cast aside by someone you thought you'd always have. I grew up in Southeast Missouri, daughter of a man who worked the same machine press at the paper mill for 36 years and a mother who never missed a Sunday in church. My sister ran off at 19, chasing a boy with a pickup truck, and I stayed close to home. Married young, raised a daughter named Cassie, and worked part-time at the elementary school cafeteria for health benefits and holidays off. She was my whole world from the minute they laid her in my arms until the night she told me I wasn't welcome on her porch. Cassie always had fire in her. She talked back in third grade and charmed her way out of detention with a smile. By middle school, she was the one other kids called when they were in trouble, and she liked it that way. She got pregnant young and dropped out of community college. But I didn't shame her. I took the baby in my arms and made dinner, like it was any other Tuesday, because that's what you do when your child needs you. You make room, and you figure out the rest. Later, she had 2 boys by the time she turned 30. Jobs came and went. So did boyfriends, but I stayed steady. I watched the boys while she went to job fairs and second interviews, some of which led to shifts at bars or just long weekends that didn't have much to do with work. I paid for groceries when her card declined, covered the electricity twice one winter, and even took out part of my pension early when her car broke down. I didn't keep track because love doesn't use a tally sheet. We lived in a small, split level just west of town, the kind of house with worn linoleum and blinds that always got tangled near the sliding door. But it was ours. We had our routines, Wednesday dinners, cartoons too loud in the background, laundry folded late at night, and a habit that started one summer, when money felt tight and futures felt thin. Once a week, we'd each buy a scratch ticket or quick pick from the gas station on the corner. She always said, if we ever hit it big, we'd split it down the middle. I got, "You, Mom," she used to say every single time she'd say it, laughing. But it always sounded real to me. I remember the week it happened, clearer than I remember what I ate yesterday. We were sitting on the couch, local news talking about a winning lottery ticket sold just 3 miles away at the exact station where we always went. I'd been there that Monday, picked up milk and a ticket, just like usual. She asked about it later. Real casual, said, "Did you grab one this week?" And I said I did. Didn't think much of it until Friday morning, when the ticket was gone from the fridge. The magnet was still there, bright yellow with a smiley face. Just no slip underneath it. That's when things shifted. She started pulling away, barely said, "Good morning." Took phone calls in the hallway and locked her bedroom door for the first time since we'd moved in together. I didn't push. She always needed space when she was nervous or overwhelmed. I told myself, maybe it was a man. Maybe she was scared about money again. I tried to believe that until she came home 3 days later, wearing new shoes with a grin that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "You're not going to believe this." She held up the check like it was made of gold. $10 million. "I won. Mom, can you believe it?" she said. I stared at her face and felt something hollow open up inside me, because I knew she didn't buy that ticket. She never bought them, never liked small talk with the clerk, never waited in line. But there she was, holding my dream, like it had always belonged to her, and not saying a word about where it came from. 3 days after that, she was gone. Took the boys, the furniture, the silver picture frames, even the graduation mug that used to sit next to mine in the cabinet. Strong women raise strong daughters, it said, but hers was the only one still standing. I didn't know she was leaving until Mr. Frank next door leaned over the fence, cigarette in hand, and said, "Saw the truck this morning? Thought you were moving too." I said, "Nothing," just nodded and stared at the empty driveway. Because what do you say when your own daughter disappears into a mansion paid for with your signature? I stood in that kitchen for a long time, hand resting on the fridge magnet, the silence thick enough to hear the hum of the old refrigerator. I didn't cry. Not then, because deep down I knew something she didn't. She never turned the ticket over, never looked at the name, scratched across the back, and that would be the last mistake she ever made. The day after Cassie left, the house felt different. Not empty exactly, but altered. I walked through each room like I was trying to remember what it used to feel like when the boys' toys were scattered across the floor, when the laundry basket overflowed with mismatched socks and little t-shirts. Her mug was gone from the kitchen shelf, the one with the pink lettering that said Mom Fuel. She used to laugh every time she reached for it, called it her magic cup. It sat beside mine every morning. Now it was just me and that yellow magnet still clinging to the fridge door, smiling like nothing had changed. That evening, I opened the drawer near the stove, where we kept old receipts and grocery lists. Underneath a stack of clipped coupons and expired warranty papers, I found what I was looking for, the photo I'd taken of the ticket. It wasn't a good photo. Blurry tilted, taken half for fun and half to remember which numbers I'd picked. But it was clear enough to see the time, the date, the store, and the digits. I held it in my hand for a long time, not thinking, just breathing. I didn't call her. I didn't send a message or write a letter. Instead, I put on my coat and walked the 8 blocks to the gas station where I'd bought that ticket. Same place I'd been going for years. Same clerk behind the counter. "Miss Marlene," he said, smiling like he always did. "Haven't seen you in a while." I nodded and asked if he remembered the ticket I bought the Monday before last. I told him it might have been around noon. Said I joked about winning big and buying myself a house by the lake. He laughed, said, "Yeah, you said you'd leave your daughter the dishes." I smiled just barely. Then I asked if they kept security footage. His face changed. He leaned in a little. "You think someone took it?" I didn't answer. I just asked if he could check the video from that day. It took about 10 minutes. He brought me to a back room that smelled like motor oil and old coffee. The monitor was small and the picture was grainy, but there I was, clear as day. My gray coat, the canvas bag I always carried to avoid using plastic. I handed him the money, took the ticket, and just before I turned to leave, I reached into my purse and pulled out a pen. Wrote something on the back. My hand shook just watching it. "Can I record this?" I asked. He looked at me, then gave a small nod. "Yeah. Go ahead." I took out my phone, filmed the screen for 30 silent seconds, then thanked him and walked back home with the video saved in my photos. Later that day, I called the state lottery office. I told them what happened, gave them the date, the store, the time. I told them my name was signed on the back of the ticket and that I had proof. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then the woman said, "If your signature's on it and the footage matches, we can open an investigation. We'll need everything you have." I asked, "Can you freeze the winnings?" She said once the case was opened, yes. That was all I needed to hear. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat at the table in the same chair Cassie used to slump into after long days, talking about how unfair life was, how she felt like a failure. I used to make tea when she said that, sometimes warmed up pie just to distract her. Now there was just the sound of the refrigerator humming and the rain tapping on the windows. The following morning, I walked 3 blocks to meet Dana, the attorney a neighbor had recommended. She was sharp but kind, and when I handed her the envelope with my documents, she didn't blink. She looked through everything, photo of the ticket, the surveillance clip, the printed receipt, and said, This is a real case, Marlene. This isn't just a misunderstanding. This is theft. We filed a formal claim that afternoon. 2 days later, the call came from the lottery office. They confirmed the freeze. The payout was on hold pending full review. I didn't tell Cassie. I didn't comment on her posts. I didn't even pick up the phone. But I watched, quietly. She had changed her profile picture to one of her standing in front of a marble staircase. The caption said, "Finally living the life I deserve." I clicked through photos of poolside brunches, champagne flutes, high heels on polished floors. None of it looked real. It looked like a show she was putting on for people who hadn't seen her in years. Cousins who never sent birthday cards were now calling her queen in the comments. Her old high school friends girls, who used to whisper behind her back, suddenly called her an inspiration. There wasn't a single photo of the house we used to share. Not one mention of the woman who helped raise her children. No trace of where she came from. It was like I'd been scrubbed from the story. Then came the post that stopped me cold. A picture of her holding a champagne glass in one hand, with the other raised in a toast. The caption read, "Surround yourself with winners, not leeches." The comments rolled in fast. "You're glowing, good riddance to dead weight. So proud of you for cutting toxic people out of your life." I didn't respond. I didn't even flinch. I just hit print on every single page. She didn't know what was coming. Dana called me later that week. The Lottery Commission had confirmed receipt of all evidence. They would be issuing a correction and scheduling a press announcement for the rightful claimant, me. We didn't plan a big reveal. Just a quiet, factual statement to set the record straight. I asked Dana if we needed to notify Cassie in advance. She said no. The state would handle all communication with her bank and legal team. That same night, Cassie posted a story from a rooftop bar. Her boys in the background unattended while she clinked glasses with strangers. Her caption read, "Manifesting more millions." I watched her face on the screen, flushed smiling, and knew she had no idea that within hours, every card in her wallet would stop working. 2 mornings after the press conference, Cassie posted a picture from a rooftop lounge, pearls around her neck, cocktail in hand, legs crossed like she didn't have a care in the world. The caption read, "Still manifesting millions." I stared at the screen for a while, quiet, letting the weight of it settle. She hadn't seen the news. Not yet. By mid-afternoon, her page went still. No updates, no stories, nothing new in the comments. Just quiet. That same evening, Dana forwarded me the formal documentation from the lottery office. The payout had been fully transferred to my name. Cassie was no longer legally tied to any part of it. The accounts were frozen, the correction had been issued, and her name removed from the original records. The kitchen felt smaller that day, like the walls were settling around me again. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel empty, just calm. I folded the documents and slid them into a folder, tucked it beside the recipes I'd clipped from old magazines, then stood at the sink with a cup of tea that had already gone cold. She didn't call that day. She didn't call the next, either. But at 12:18 on the third day, the phone started buzzing. One call after another. My name lighting up across notifications, messages, missed calls, unknown numbers. I waited. Let them pile up. At 1:43, she finally showed up on the screen. I picked up. There wasn't a hello. No pause. Just her voice sharp and panicked. "You stole my life." I didn't say anything right away. I listened. "You had no right," she snapped. "You went behind my back. You embarrassed me. Do you know what people are saying? How am I supposed to explain this?" I waited again, letting the silence stretch. I could hear her breathing fast, like she'd been crying, or running, or both. Then I said, "You could start by saying thank you." Her voice cracked. "Thank you for what I shifted in the chair. For the 5 years I kept the lights on when your jobs didn't last. For the rent I covered. For the bills I paid. For babysitting your children so you could go chase the next thing. For not calling the police when the ticket disappeared. Her voice came back smaller. You're lying. No, I said. I signed it. You didn't. The store footage confirms it. The state has the documents. This isn't a debate. She didn't answer. For a second, I thought maybe she'd hung up, but then I heard her voice again, shaky now. You ruined everything. No, I said. I just stopped pretending it was yours. The line was still. Then she whispered, You don't understand. I bought things. The house, the car, clothes. What am I supposed to do now? I've already donated half. I said, my voice steady. To single mothers, to shelters, to women who fight for their families instead of walking away from them. There was a sound like a gasp, short and sharp. You're crazy, she said. But there was nothing behind it, no energy left. I'm finished being your safety net, I said, then hung up. The phone screen dimmed, and for the first time in months, my hands weren't shaking. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders. The sun was setting low behind the trees, and everything looked quiet. Even the neighborhood dogs weren't barking. I didn't feel lighter, not exactly. But the heaviness had shifted, moved somewhere that didn't sit so square in my chest. The next morning, her world began to fall apart. By dawn, her bank accounts were sealed. The cards she used for every photo, every brunch, every last-minute gift declined. The car she drove, leased under a name she no longer had rights to. The house she bragged about in posts was suddenly in legal review. Nothing she'd wrapped herself in was actually hers. Not the watches, not the handbags, not the luxury that she used to keep people close. Cousin Lila called me that afternoon. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. She said she'd run into Cassie downtown. She was fuming, Lila said. Stormed out of that boutique like it was on fire. Tried every card in her wallet and couldn't pay for a scarf. I didn't say much back, just listened as Lila told me how Cassie had gone red in the face blaming the clerk, swearing it was all a glitch. Then she asked how I was doing. I told her I was fine. 3 days later, I heard through Dana that Cassie had been served the final documentation from the Lottery Commission. There was no more waiting, no more loopholes. She couldn't file an appeal, couldn't delay the process. The footage, the signature, the paperwork, everything had already closed the door. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about pride. But truth has a weight to it. It settles in whether you're ready or not. That evening, there was a knock at my door. Not loud, not slow. Just firm. I looked through the curtain. She stood there, sweatshirt pulled tight around her, no makeup hair pulled back in a way I hadn't seen since high school. She wasn't crying, but her face was tight, eyes wide like someone trying to hold in too much all at once. Mom, she said when I opened the door just a few inches. We need to talk. I didn't say anything. You can't do this, she said. I didn't know it was your ticket. You didn't check, I said. You just took it. Her mouth opened, then closed. I messed up, she said. But freezing my accounts, taking everything, this isn't justice. This is revenge. I didn't move. You called me a leech, I said. You posted it for everyone to see. That was your choice. Her voice dropped. I need help. There it was, plain as day. I don't have anywhere to go, she said. You made your point. You won. Can we go back to normal? I looked at her, really looked at her. Then I said, goodbye. Her jaw dropped. What I didn't say it again, just started to close the door. You'll regret this, she shouted. You think money's going to fix everything? You think this gives you peace? I stopped just long enough to say, "No, but I bought you out of my life." Then I closed the door, quietly. After I closed the door, I stood still for a moment, listening to her footsteps fade down the walkway. I didn't move until I heard the gate click shut. Then I walked back to the kitchen, rinsed out my mug, and set it beside the sink. The house was quiet, except for the creak of the floorboard near the back window and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I pulled the curtain back a few inches and looked out across the yard. The garden beds were bare this time of year, just turned soil and the last of the dead leaves clinging to the fence line. I stayed like that for a while, hand resting against the windowsill. The air inside the house was still, but it didn't feel cold. Not anymore. The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, toasted a slice of the oat bread I liked. Then I sat down at the table with Dana's folder and looked through the documents again. The check reissued in my name, the official verification letter from the state, the bank transfer information. My name at the top of every form, not hers. I read them slowly, carefully, like I was memorizing them one by one. Later that day, I drove out to the lake. I hadn't been in years, not since Cassie was a teenager. I parked near the boat launch and sat on the bench by the water, watching the breeze ripple across the surface in thin silver lines. It wasn't crowded, just 2 other cars in the lot and a man walking his dog along the trail. I didn't bring anything with me, no books, no phone calls to return. I just sat there, my hands in my coat pockets, breathing in the air off the water. I thought about the years I spent keeping everything together. I thought about the boys' birthday parties in the backyard, folding laundry after everyone went to bed, buying school supplies on clearance, and tucking receipts into my purse to track every penny. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt awake. That night, I got home just after sunset. I made a pot of soup and swept the kitchen floor. The motion felt good, predictable. Before bed, I wrote out a grocery list, made a few notes in the old checkbook ledger I still used, and then turned off the light in the hallway. The air felt clean, like something had shifted inside the walls. In the days that followed, I kept to myself. I didn't tell the neighbors. I didn't post anything online. I didn't call family to explain. There wasn't anything to explain. What needed to be known had already been said in the documents, in the footage, in the truth that had always been waiting for someone to look close enough. One morning, I opened the hall closet and pulled down a dusty shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were photos, mostly old ones, Cassie as a toddler in overalls, the 3 of us at the county fair, one from Christmas, the year her first son was born. I sat down on the carpet and flipped through each one. Some had bent corners. A few had faded along the edges. I held one of her at 6 years old, grinning with missing front teeth and freckles across her nose. It was strange the way time compresses when you're not expecting it. That photo and the knock at my door 3 days ago felt like they belonged to 2 different lifetimes. I put the photos back in the box and slid it under the bed. That afternoon, Dana called again. "They've filed the final notices," she said. "Everything's officially in your name. The title on the house Cassie purchased is under review due to the frozen funds, and the car lease is being transferred back to the dealership." "Will she be notified?" "She's already received the paperwork," Dana said. "I imagine she's not taking it well." I didn't answer. I just thanked her and hung up. Later that night, I sat on the back step with a blanket across my knees and watched the light in the neighbor's window flicker as they turned off the TV. I used to wonder what peace would feel like. Now I knew it didn't come in a rush. It didn't announce itself. It just settled in one moment at a time. The next morning, I woke up early. I stood at the sink and looked out over the yard. Then I opened the kitchen drawer and pulled out the envelope with the original lottery ticket. My name still faintly visible across the back, pressed in by the pen I always kept clipped to my purse strap. I placed it in a plastic sleeve and tucked it away in the folder with everything else. I didn't need it anymore, not for proof, not for memory, but it was mine. I kept it because it reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. That I was still here, still standing, still capable of holding the truth in both hands and walking forward. I don't know what Cassie told her friends. I don't know if she spun another story or let the silence stretch until people stopped asking. I didn't check. I didn't go looking for updates or photos or comments. I'd spent long enough watching from the outside. I didn't need to look anymore. Instead, I sat down that evening and started drafting a letter. Not to Cassie, not to anyone I knew, to myself. I wrote out the names of the women's shelters I'd donated to, the single moms support program I'd found through the church bulletin board, the scholarship fund for returning adult students I planned to contribute to next. And then I wrote something simple. This isn't about what was taken. It's about what's still mine. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I stood at the kitchen window in my robe, sipping coffee from the same mug I'd used for years, the one Cassie left behind. I stared out across the yard, the grass still damp with dew, the light just starting to stretch across the fence. It was quiet in the way early mornings are when the world hasn't caught up yet. That was the day I made my first real decision. Not out of anger, not for show, just something steady I could put my hands on. I got dressed, pulled my hair back, and drove down to the bank. I sat with a financial advisor, a woman named Celia, who looked me in the eye and spoke without hurry. She walked me through the paperwork line by line. I'd never handled money like this before, but I listened, asked questions when I needed to, and signed each page with a calm hand. By lunchtime, I had set up 2 separate charitable funds, one for housing assistance for single mothers, and another to provide emergency grants for women starting over after family estrangement. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't send out announcements. I just went home, made a turkey sandwich, and swept the kitchen floor. That afternoon, I walked down to the library. I printed out the confirmation letters and filed them away next to the original lottery documentation. Then I took out the newspaper from that week and reread the short column that had run about the press conference. It didn't say much, just that the rightful winner had been confirmed and the payout corrected. There was no mention of names, no photos, no drama, just the facts. The next few days passed in pieces. I donated 3 boxes of unused items to the shelter on Maple Street. I sorted through the closets, packed away the old bedding from when the boys stayed with me, and dropped it off at the church for their winter drive. I spent an afternoon at the park near the junior high school, sitting on a bench near the pond where Cassie used to feed the ducks when she was small. Everything around me looked the same. The air, the streets, the people walking their dogs or pulling weeds from their flower beds. But inside, I felt like something was shifting. Not fast, just slowly, like a tide going out. On Sunday morning, I attended service for the first time in months. Mrs. Larimore asked where I'd been. I told her I'd just needed a little time. She patted my arm and told me to come by for tea one day that week. I said I'd think about it. Afterward, I sat in the car for a long time before turning the key. The lot had mostly emptied, the only sound the hum of the old heater blowing across the dashboard. I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel, familiar hands, but different somehow. I wasn't carrying the same weight I used to, and that meant something. That night, I opened the hallway closet and pulled down the old suitcase I used to keep tucked behind the holiday decorations. It still smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs. Inside, I packed a few things: a cardigan, my favorite slippers, and the folder with everything that mattered. Then I zipped it shut and set it by the door. The next morning, I drove to a women's resource center one town over, not to ask for help, but to offer it. I told them I'd like to volunteer sorting supplies, organizing donation bins, whatever they needed. The director was a woman named Deirdre, tall and quiet with kind eyes. She nodded slowly, then asked me to fill out a form. I wrote my name carefully on the top line, then sat back in the chair and waited. By the end of the week, I was spending 3 mornings a week at the center. Folding clothes, labeling food packages, greeting new arrivals. I kept to myself mostly, but I listened. I heard women talk about starting over, about being forgotten, about being told they were too old, too worn down, too much trouble. And I just kept folding. I didn't tell them my story. I didn't need to. I just showed up. One day, I arrived early and found a small envelope on the desk by the break room. It didn't have a name on it, just the word "thank you" written in blue ink. Inside was a folded note and a drawing, crayoned hearts, stick figures, one labeled Grandma. No signature, just something left behind by someone I must have helped without realizing. I tucked it into my coat pocket and carried it home with me. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table listening to the soft tick of the clock on the wall. I thought about the years I spent keeping Cassie's world intact. The lunches packed, the forms signed, the bills paid in silence, and I thought about that envelope on the desk. About how something that small could feel like everything. I pulled out a notebook and began making a list. Not of losses, not of regrets. Just of things I still wanted to do. Paint the porch railing, plant something by the mailbox, visit the museum in Springfield, drive down to the coast just once. I wrote slowly, pausing between each line. Then I underlined the last one, "keep showing up." As I folded the page and slid it into the back of the notebook, I realized the house no longer felt like a place I'd been left behind in. It felt like a beginning. Quiet, steady mine. The day the formal transfer was processed, Dana called just after lunch. I was out front pulling weeds from the flower beds. The soil was damp, and the clouds were thick over the house, low and gray. I wiped my hands on an old towel and picked up the phone. "It's done," she said. "The final payout has been issued to your name, and Cassie has been fully removed from any legal or financial claim." I didn't say anything right away, just nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "You should receive confirmation from the state by mail next week. We've updated your file and notified all relevant parties. There's nothing else you need to do." I thanked her and hung up. The call was short, clean. There wasn't much left to say. I sat down on the porch steps and looked out toward the sidewalk. The magnolia tree across the street had started to bloom early. The petals were already dropping soft and pale against the curb. I sat like that for a while, arms resting on my knees, the air still damp with the promise of rain. That night, I cooked a full dinner for the first time in weeks. Baked chicken rice with parsley roasted carrots. I ate by the window with the kitchen light off, letting the evening come in soft through the glass. I didn't light a candle. I didn't turn on the TV. It was just quiet, and that was enough. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. It was from the bank confirmation of the completed account transfer. I signed for it, thanked the delivery man, and brought it inside. I didn't open it right away, just set it on the counter beside the basket of onions and the radio I kept meaning to replace. That afternoon, the phone rang again. This time, it was Lila. She was the only cousin who hadn't taken sides, or maybe the only one who hadn't pretended to. "You heard from her?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not since the porch." Lila was quiet for a second. Then she said, "I ran into her downtown. She was trying to pay for something at the pharmacy. Said the card kept declining. She looked, I don't know, different. Thin, tired." I didn't respond. "She didn't mention you," Lila added. But she knew. I thanked her and hung up. That evening, I pulled the box of paperwork back out and filed away the last of the forms. Everything had a place now, even the photo of the ticket I took before I lost it. I slid it into a clear sleeve and pressed the folder shut. The phone didn't ring again for 2 days. Then at 4:12 on a Friday afternoon, Cassie called. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. At 5:20, she called again. This time, I answered. She didn't yell, didn't accuse. Her voice was small flat. I don't have a place to stay, she said. I didn't respond. I didn't think it would get this far, she continued. I thought it would pass. You didn't check, I said. There was a long pause. I'm not asking for the money, she said. I just don't know what to do. I didn't answer right away. The line stayed quiet. I've lost everything, she said. The house is under review. They came for the car yesterday. The bank froze everything. I'm staying with a friend, but it's temporary. She stopped talking for a while, and when she spoke again, her voice broke. I know I messed up. I didn't say anything. I just need to figure things out, she said. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I hope you do. She didn't respond. Then the call ended. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a check. Not to Cassie, to the Resource Center. A new donation this time for their housing transition program. I included a note asking that it be used for women with children starting over after financial loss. I didn't sign my full name, just Marlene. The following morning, I dropped it off in the mail slot outside their office and went home. The sun had come up bright over the rooftops, and I opened the windows to let in the breeze. I washed the curtains. I aired out the blankets. I mopped the floors and changed the sheets. By late afternoon, I was sitting on the front steps with a glass of lemonade and a book I'd started months ago but never finished. The air was warm. A few kids biked by, laughing, one of them carrying a backpack too big for his shoulders. I watched them pass, then turned the page. Across the street, a delivery van pulled up. The driver stepped out with a clipboard and carried a small box to the porch. It wasn't for me. It was for the new neighbors next door, a young couple who'd just moved in. I nodded as he passed. He waved back. The day passed without incident. No calls, no letters, just stillness. And when evening came, I lit a candle on the table, warmed up the leftover rice, and sat down again. The house no longer felt like a place I was waiting in. It felt like mine. A few days after I mailed the donation check, I got a letter from the Resource Center. It wasn't anything official, just a handwritten note from Deirdre, thanking me for the continued support and saying they'd use the funds to cover a deposit for a woman and her 2 boys who had been living out of their car. I read it twice. Then I folded the paper and tucked it into the drawer where I kept old church programs and family recipes. The next morning started like any other. Coffee at the table. The sound of someone mowing a lawn 2 houses down. I was just finishing a crossword puzzle when I heard a knock at the door. Not loud, not rushed, just steady. I looked through the window and saw Cassie on the porch. She wasn't dressed like before. No designer purse, no heels. She wore a sweatshirt with sleeves too long and jeans that looked like they hadn't been ironed in weeks. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes puffy. I opened the door, but just a few inches. She didn't speak right away. I know I said I wasn't asking for help, she finally said, but I don't have anywhere else to go. I didn't answer. I called Aunt Lila. She said, you're the one who donated to that shelter on Maple. I nodded. She looked down at her hands. Her voice came quiet. They said they have room for 1 adult and 2 kids. That's it? I haven't seen the boys in 2 weeks. They're with their father's sister. She paused. I don't want them to think I gave up on them. I didn't say anything. I waited. I messed up, she said. I know that. I was selfish. I didn't think things through. I didn't think at all. I wanted so badly to not feel like I was drowning. She looked up at me, eyes full of something I couldn't name. I blamed you, she said. I told everyone it was your fault, that you were jealous, that you were holding me back. But the truth is, I was terrified. Of the money, of being alone with it, of people only wanting something from me. She swallowed hard. I pushed you away because I thought it meant I could stand on my own. I thought if I cut ties, I wouldn't owe anybody anything. But all I did was make myself smaller. Her voice cracked. You didn't ruin me, she said. You saved me from myself. I opened the door a little wider. She stepped back just a little, as if giving me space. I'm not asking to come back here, she said. I just needed to tell you before it's too late. I looked at her, really looked at her. Then I stepped out onto the porch, closed the door behind me, and sat down on the top step. She hesitated, then sat beside me. The air between us was still. No cars passed. No dogs barked. Just the sound of wind through the branches above the house. I lost everything, she said, her hands in her lap. And I deserved it. But when I saw that article about the press conference, the one that named you, I realized you didn't do it to punish me. You did it to remind me who I used to be. I nodded once. Nothing more. Every post I made, every photo, it wasn't about joy. It was about proving I'd made it. But I hadn't. I was just louder. We sat like that for a while. Then she turned her head toward me. I want to get better, she said. Not rich, not admired, just better. I looked out toward the street. The wind shifted again, soft and warm against the side of the house. I called the shelter, she said. They said I could meet with someone Tuesday. Start over. If I can get the boys back full-time, I'll need to find a job. Maybe something at the school again, like you used to do. There was no expectation in her voice, no demand, just the smallest edge of something new. Maybe it was humility, maybe it was hope. I reached into my pocket and handed her a small folded card. It was the name of a woman I'd met through the volunteer work. Someone who helped connect women with local employers willing to train. She took the card in both hands, held it gently like it might break. Thank you, she said. Not loud, just enough to carry. We didn't speak much after that. She stood, nodded once, and walked back down the steps. I watched her until she reached the sidewalk. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. I sat on the porch for a long while after she left. The sun had shifted westward, casting long shadows across the fence. The street was quiet again. Familiar. Inside, the kitchen smelled like lemon from the floor cleaner. The radio played softly near the window. I folded a clean dish towel and set it beside the sink. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I owed her anything. And maybe, just maybe, she was learning what it meant to give something back. Cassie didn't call after that. She didn't need to. I saw her once, maybe 2 months later, across the produce section at the grocery store. She was pushing a small cart with one hand and holding her youngest boy's wrist with the other. He was tugging toward the apples. She let him go, and he ran to the bin with that loose-limbed joy children carry before they learn to be careful. She looked tired, but not worn down. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and I noticed her shirt had a name tag. I didn't read it. I didn't wave. She didn't see me. And that was all right. I finished shopping, paid for my groceries, and drove home with the windows cracked just enough to let in the warm air. That night, I folded laundry while the local news played in the background, just voices filling the space. There was no grand gesture, no perfect apology, just silence and peace. A week later, I received a letter postmarked from the shelter's mailing office. Inside was a small note. No signature, no return address. Just a square of lined paper that said, "Thank you. I'm trying." That was enough. I'd stopped needing an apology. What I'd wanted, what I'd waited for, was a sign that she'd begun telling herself the truth. And in a way, I suppose that letter said more than any explanation ever could. When I think back on it now, it's not the arguments, or the court dates, or the press conferences that stay with me. It's the quiet moments, the porch steps, the folded card, the smell of lemons in the kitchen. Those are the things that matter in the end. The things you carry when everything else fades. Not every ending ties itself into a neat bow. Some just settle, like dust on a windowsill, like light through an old curtain. Cassie didn't come back to the house. She didn't need to, and I didn't expect her to. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, but that doesn't mean you have to live in the wreckage. Sometimes justice doesn't look like a gavel or a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your name intact, your heart steady, and your dignity still yours. I'm not sure what the boys will remember when they're older. Maybe just pieces. A warm hand, a clean bed, a mother who stopped running. And maybe someday they'll know the whole story. Maybe they won't. That part's not mine to tell. But this part is. And if you've listened this far, thank you for holding space for a story like mine. If it brought something to mind, someone you've let go of, or forgiven in silence, feel free to share in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more quiet stories like this one, you're welcome to stay. I'll be here.